innovatively. Just before she started the session, we were discussing, and I completely agree with her. The Indian style of working is to think differently, to try something differently. We are not process driven, she was mentioning. And I think that is really the result of the entire transfer pricing regime and the development that has taken place over the last several years. I would personally want to believe and really commend the tax department as well as the professionals, the way transfer pricing has gone about. We've progressed much faster and more effectively than some of the other advanced regimes like US and UK, where transfer pricing has been in place for more than 50 years. So really I feel that I also wish, though I have been associated always with an international firm, but on the heart and core I am a chartered accountant, and I also surely wish that with the emergence of domestic transfer pricing, this will surely come up with a lot of opportunities for chartered accountants, for local CA firms, and this is the right time really. Transfer pricing is no big deal, like ma'am said, it's just jargons that we throw. But effectively, it is about the facts, it is about the business, it is about common sense. So if one really understands these basic things, then it's not something that you really need some international methodologies and stuff to do transfer pricing. So I would really encourage each and every chartered accountant here and outside to take and look at this as an opportunity to help your domestic clients to gear through this particular regime of domestic transfer pricing. Some other important points, before I start, because I think my session is really just to give an overview of the provisions, which I really, which most of you over here would know. But I would really like to touch upon certain points which ma'am mentioned, and which are really important when you're gearing up for domestic transfer pricing. While there is this perception that introduction of domestic transfer pricing is bringing objectivity, my belief is that it is going to lead to a lot of debate and litigation. Because as she rightly said, that adopting a TNMM method, now if your expenditure is say 1% of your total turnover and you're going to defend that transaction under the TNMM, it's not going to serve the purpose. But at the same time, by compulsorily imposing methods to justify an expenditure, you have put the taxpayer in the boat that you have to select one of the methods. So this kind of conflict is going to come, and which is that I believe that earlier the flexibility was there when the assessing officer was analyzing this transaction, as to the reasonableness, which is more from an overall business need, purpose, legitimate, what is the benefit, that I believe would be more better than compulsorily trying to impose certain methods onto defining or defending these transactions. That is one. Secondly, of course, once domestic TP has come in place, the government has also come up with other method. Now, if you see, there were 5 methods, and there was a 6th other method which was prescribed. This other method will give that leeway and flexibility, I still believe, to defend the way you were earlier defending your transaction more on a business rationale or more on the basis of overall market and scenario than getting or falling into one of these 5 methods. The other important point she mentioned was that when transfer pricing provision was introduced, a lot of Indian companies were reporting it was not shifting out of profit, but it was shifting profit into the tax exempt units. That's a very important point. Now, there have been case laws which, as she rightly said, have really said that you cannot use arm's length for more than ordinary. And that I believe is true, because an arm's length price, the way it is defined in our law, is very limited. Whereas an ordinary profit in the market could even be a company which is earning a 50% margin or a 60% margin. And if you can justify that, by saying that, okay, there are 30 players in the market. Out of the 30 players, the average may be 18%. But there are still a few players, like, which may be more than 10 players who may be earning 50-60% margin. That is an ordinary course. Then I don't think one should, restrict to the average. So these are going to definitely throw up some major challenges for us, because then effectively what you're saying is that when you have a transaction, you need to be within their arm's length range. You cannot be below, you cannot be above. And that is very difficult because that goes against business dynamics. So these practical difficulties are going to come up. Another important point I would like to acknowledge, and I agree with ma'am as she mentioned that the understanding the core of the transaction, that is very essential. Instead of jumping to the TNMM method, if you can explain the core of the transaction, my personal experience has been that the revenue officers, the TPOs, have agreed to the rationale, and it's not in all cases that they have made an adjustment. So that is where the assessee comes, and that links again to another important point she mentioned, is that as consultants, we should not be afraid of taking the assessees before the tax officers. In fact, in my experience, I have seen that there have obtained relief in majority of the cases where there are crucial debatable issues. Where I've taken an assessee to the revenue, it has always helped more than me trying to defend before the TPO. So I definitely feel that these are some very useful tips and thoughts that ma'am has shared with all of us. And we should really, and now when we are going into the domestic TP regime, there are going to be more challenges. So we have to be open to all these things, understand that instead of just trying to bucket ourselves into one of these 5-6 methods and trying to defend, all these other practical aspects will really help us gear our way out to this particular regime. It is going to evolve. My belief is that, of course, it's going to evolve. It's not something that, like when TP started, international transactions started, it has taken time to settle. There are a number of decisions now. Domestic TP to that extent will be slightly better because at least you have some precedence from international TP. It's not like a new area completely. Plus, you have precedence from earlier than international TP. As ma'am said, there are a lot of cases on 48-2 tax holiday units. So, to that extent, we are more better geared. It's just that we need to ensure that the compliance is now put in place. So, what is an additional requirement is really you are always following as an assessee. If you are following the true mechanism, you are always following market value or arm's length. What you really now need to do is just document that. Now, how do you document that? And these are going to be challenges, and which I'm sure during the course of the day, the idea when we structured this program was to kind of bifurcate into subsections and try and let those speakers cover the case studies. And at the end, also have a panel discussion so that any questions that you have, which are debatable questions, you must throw it open to those relevant speakers as well as the panel. Because I think more than the theory, here it will be important to have the Q&A and discussion where you will have questions and your questions are answered or discussed. Nobody will be able to give an answer, but one can always attempt to have a debate and discussion and learn from that. So just to move ahead, sorry. So really what I want to cover is, emergence, the scope, what is the compliance, interplay, some technical issues. And then really how do you plan. Now November is on the anvil, and in fact this year there has been more challenges because of the e-filing as well. So this year is really a task in that sense where you're managing e-filing for your international transactions plus the domestic TP. As ma'am said, the Pre-Finance Act, the tax authority always was empowered to disallow payments to related parties which were excessive or unreasonable. And even with regard to tax holiday units, there was always a requirement that it should be a fair market value. So, only thing was that Pre-Finance Act 2012, there was no specific method prescribed. However, with the introduction of STT, now there is a specific mechanism that has been brought into place. As I said, there are advantages as well as disadvantages. It is always better to look at the positive side of whatever the rules have been introduced and move forward rather than, looking at what is not done appropriately. That's my belief. I feel to some extent, of course, certain transactions, etc., you'll be able to justify on a more objective basis. Again, within TP, as ma'am rightly said, you can bring in whatever limited objectivity in the subjectivity game. but one can only attempt to do that. The genesis of introduction of SDT was really the Supreme Court decision. As you all know, in the case of GlaxoSmithKline, where it was suggested there were transactions between tax holiday units and non-tax holiday units, and it was suggested that domestic related party transactions should be introduced. So really, the thought has come from that, and during the finance bill speech, the finance minister has specifically mentioned this, so we understand from where it is coming. Of course, the first year, as you all know, effective is April 12, 13, for which the filings have to be done by November 13. Now, if you really look at it from a UN and OECD commentary perspective, there's not a lot of commentary on it, but what I could feel is that you have the non-discrimination clause in the treaties, and these clauses really say that an Indian enterprise which is wholly or partly controlled or directly controlled by a non-resident shall not be subject to, in India, any taxation or requirement connected which is more burdensome than the taxation requirements to other similar Indian enterprises. So to that extent, when there was international TP for these foreign subsidiaries, and when there was no mechanism in place for the domestic subsidiaries, there was more burden on those entities which were controlled by non-residents. So to that extent, by introducing the provisions of domestic TP, you're making the para 5 to that extent redundant in that sense, and ensuring that there is no discrimination. If you look at it from a global perspective, there are a number of countries where domestic TP is in existence. Like in the US, also you have domestic TP because they have state taxes. So if there is a transaction between two entities within the same state, then there is no TP. But if it is between two different states, then there is transfer pricing. Because the tax rates for state A and state B could be different, and there could be that arbitrage opportunity available. So they have that provision. Similarly, UK to some extent has domestic transfer pricing. So there are these other countries, Canada, there are these other countries which do have these provisions. And the entire essence of these provisions is to try and plug any tax arbitrage opportunities, to try and ensure that the dealings between even domestic entities are not planned in a way that you do some kind of a tax planning. So that's really the broad objective. I would agree that it's always good to have these provisions. Now there are certain, because of the way the related persons are defined under 48(2), what is closely connected, all these are ambiguities. Like managerial remuneration, these are all very debatable issues. So these transactions, there should have been some circular clarification, something by the government to help the assessees to really say, okay, how does one define managerial remuneration? It is very subjective. A person with an X number of years experience would be, say, drawing a crore. Person with a similar X years of experience would be drawing 2 crores in the open market, and that would be an arm's length situation. So one can't really go in a quantitative comparison for managerial remuneration. So there are these transactions which are going to throw up challenge, but overall I don't see any issue in that sense. The emergence, as I said, the intent of the law is really to provide a fair basis for the calculation of FMP. Doing away with tax arbitrage abuse that stems from differential tax rates, tax holiday benefits, and accumulated losses. So these are all arbitrage opportunities available. And at the end of the day, we are all Indian citizens also. So as we should not shy away from the fact that the government would want to protect their base, and there's no harm in that to bring in some mechanism or provisions which help both the assessee and the taxpayer and the tax department. Scope of SDT, really essentially what it covers is 48(2), which talks about expenditures. Now in case of 48(2), related parties are defined, and what the earlier methodology mentioned was that if it's excessive or unreasonable, it should be disallowed. The APA, APIA 8 provisions This talks about between different business units of the same taxpayer. So this is intra-unit transfers. Here, income and expenditure both get covered because they are talking about any kind of transaction between these units. It doesn't restrict to expenditure or income. So here, income, expenditure both would be covered, which would need to be at fair market value. And then you have 80IA 10, which are transactions between closely connected entities, which would also which is again another debatable issue as to what is closely connected and what interpretation one must take. Of course, during the discussion, several respected professionals will give their views on this matter. But I believe that since closely connected is not defined, if you have to draw reference from both 92A as well as 40A2 related party definition and ensure that all the gambit of associated enterprise transactions that are available, you cover to test whether an entity is closely connected. Just to be conservative, because one needs to be cautious that as a chartered accountant, our job is really to report the transaction. One should not take a call as to whether you want to report or not report, because we need to give the right or the benefit to the department to scrutinize that transaction, and there is a penal implication for that, which is rightly put in for not reporting a transaction. So one needs to be cautious of these facts and then accordingly, report it and leave it for the revenue to determine whether it's appropriate. And of course, all these transactions, STT's figure in the aggregate of the above mentioned transaction exceeds 5 crores during the financial year. 5 crore limit, of course, in my view, is a very low limit because managerial remuneration itself for some of these large corporations and plus a few other transactions will put you above 5 crores. So this is going to effectively bring in lot of more burden not only on the chartered accountants, at least for us it's good because it's an opportunity, but if we really understand from the department perspective, it's going to put them in fact all the more in a discomfort situation where today they are not able to manage to give time to so many international cases. They have to also deal with so many domestic TP cases. So definitely, ma'am, I'm sure you all would be, as though you rightly said that this is 2 years down the line a hassle for you all. But we just hope that, there is more infrastructure and stuff put in place so that, adequate time is given to dispose of the cases in a fair and effective manner. Now, the types of transactions to be covered essentially would be all these. Managerial remuneration, purchase and sale of shares, purchase and sale of assets, services, shared services, charge of royalty for use of trademark, purchase and sale of products, then interest expense, corporate guarantee charges, management cross charges, administrative charges, ESOPs and other benefits given to the key managerial personnel. There's a broad gamut of what all could get covered under the scope of STT. One will of course have to get into nitty-gritties to see whether you are dealing with the provision under 40A2 or you are dealing with the provisions of the tax holiday unit. If it's dealing with the provision of 40A2, transactions have to result into an expenditure. There are various issues there as to whether capital transactions should be covered or should not be covered, Now, there are a number of decisions which say that, for example, depreciation is an allowance. It's not really an expenditure. So one can easily take a view that at least capital transactions related to depreciation should not be covered. But if there are any other capital transactions where there is a cash involved, where an actual payment is needed to be made or will be made, the wordings of the rule, like you have your R&D expenditure, your cost of investment, of your acquisition of assets, you're doing IP development and there's an expenditure you're incurring. All these are deductions which you would be claiming, and these deductions could be challenged by the assessing officer as to whether they're excessive or unreasonable, and therefore those may get covered. So in that sense, you would have all capital expenditures excluded. Maybe depreciation, yes, but all others would have to be included. In terms of compliance requirements, of course, a new form has been prescribed now, which not only covers the changes in the Finance Act 2012 regarding the international transactions, talking about business restructuring, corporate guarantees, purchase or sale of shares. All these are there in the Form 3CB. In addition to that, you also have domestic transfer pricing in the Form 3CB. And it's time consuming. We've seen from our experience this year that one needs to really start, not now, maybe we would have to start 2 months, but at least whatever we have now, we should really here my view on this 3CB reporting is, again I would mention, as a CA you should always be conservative and report all transactions rather than taking a position and saying it's not a transaction or not an international transaction.